Afternoon, everybody. It's live at the Waterhole time with Wild Earth and African. And we've started out at Oldonyo Lodge, Kenya, where we've seen some fabulous sightings over the last few days. We will see what we have on offer. Apparently, we have a tail of an elephant, some giraffe, and some zebra. But my name is Ben Coley. I'll be your naturalist for the next couple of hours as we visit various locations across Africa and delight in the wildlife that we will hopefully see there. And of course, this is live, it is interactive, so you are welcome and, in fact, encouraged to send through your comments and questions to me, and I will see what I can come up with in terms of answers. But for those of you who didn't catch the show yesterday, you missed an absolute treat because we were privy to what was for me my first live leopard on live at the Waterhole down at Jabalani, just outside Hoedspruit. We spent probably, I would think, close to half an hour with a female leopard who was lying up next to the waterhole. There's some spectacular close-up visuals of her before she melted into the bush in the way that only a leopard can. But that was very, very special indeed. So who knows what will happen today? But with what has been a very regular occurrence, the elephant bulls are dominating the waterhole here at Oldonyo, up in Kenya in the Cholu Hills, which sort of separates Amboseli and Savo. And it really has been a hive of activity over the last few weeks between elephants, big herds of zebras, eland, giraffe, warthogs. We've had lots and lots of activity at this particular waterhole, and I'm sure we'll be spending plenty of time here today. Happy Monday to you, Joanne Mello. Glad you're joining us again, one of our very regular viewers. I hope you enjoyed the leopard yesterday. So that was an absolute treat for me, and I'm sure for all of you watching. But how about these for some big, beautiful elephants? Some fairly recognizable ones here, one with the floppy ear, and I'm just wondering if that's a pigmentation issue above his right eye there, the elephant on the left-hand side as we're looking at him, or if that's just a camera thing. And say a beautiful bull on the right there with only the one big tusk. Hello, Mercedes Bean. Glad you can also join us again. Ah, no, it's not a pigment issue. It is just a very old elephant who's got those very, very sunken temporal lobes. And it was just the way the light was reflecting off them. But how about that for a beautiful close-up of some gnarled, old textured skin? Maybe an eyelash trim is in order for this one. Yeah, just obviously the way the light is bouncing off it, or possibly a bit of dried mud in those depressions, a good sign of age. But a magnificent beast. Ian, it was very, very special to see that leopard, you're right. And yeah, let's hope we get another one at some point soon as well. So I don't do too many live at the waterhole sessions, but over the month, so that was my first official live leopard. Did see the back end of a couple of lionesses a few weeks ago. I think it was a cat-eyed pan. Not 100% sure, but who knows what else we'll get. And good afternoon, Sandy. Glad you can also join us. Beautiful pose from this elephant bull, watching the antics of his fellow bachelor herd members, I would imagine. I've had a lot of questions and comments over the last few weeks, really, and even months, as to why we never see any breeding herds here at El Doño. We only ever seem to see elephant bulls. And I've been trying to do a little bit of digging because it's not an area that I've visited, so it's not somewhere I'm supremely familiar with. Um, but I have got some theories after doing some reading up on the area. So, as I said earlier, this waterhole is situated in the Cholu Hills Game Reserve, which is or national park, which is sort of in between Amboseli and Savo, two areas which are very well known for their high population density of elephant. But it seems one thing that this reserve does lack is any perennial water. We've got this pumped water hole. I'm sure there are a couple of other pumped water holes as well. But there are no obvious big sources of water, no lakes, no swampy areas, no wetlands. And therefore, it's probably quite difficult to find enough water, and elephants don't want to have to trek over massive distances. A lot of the runoff from those sort of volcanic hills in this area go on to feed important river systems such as the Savo River, which obviously runs through Savo National Park and feeds various wetlands and lakes in those areas. So it seems logical to me, therefore, that breeding herds which have youngsters, which don't want to have to migrate over long areas, are going to stick closer to those larger, more permanent water sources, particularly now we're in the dry season. It started sort of in June time, and we'll have to wait till November, December before any rains come again to this area on average. So I would imagine that that is the reason behind the lack of the breeding herds. There's just not much perennial water in this area, bar one or two pumped water holes such as this. So it makes sense for the breeding herds to stay closer to permanent water sources for the sake of their youngsters and not having to move over such big distances. So whether that is true or not, I don't know, but that is my sort of best guesstimate as to what is happening and understanding the distribution of these elephants. Kim Faustino, greetings all the way from the Philippines. Lovely to know we have such diverse viewership today. It's raining where you are. I'm sorry to hear that, but I am glad that you are getting your vicarious African wildlife enjoyment through today's Live in a Waterhole. And good afternoon to Samantha Ramos. I'm glad you're also enjoying it and learning some stuff. Well, say I try and make this as interesting and as much of a learning experience as possible. I'm one of those people that always wants to know more. I suppose I never grew up from that childish why phase that we all go through. And I think it's really important that we continue learning. Yes, watching and experiencing these views and this wildlife is spectacular, but I think it adds so much more if we can at least try and understand the whys, the whats, and the wherefores of what is going on. And we can learn so much ourselves from watching these animals and the way they act and their adaptations and the specific behaviors that they exhibit. And say, I'm a big fan of puzzles. I like crosswords, I like Sudokus, I like riddles, and trying to understand and interpret the way animals are moving and why they're doing it or behaving, I find really fascinating. It's good exercise for the brain. But this Ellie's got a good idea. Stand under that big what looks like an umbrella thorn, little gentle dust bath, and a little bit of some down chill time. And a blood scratch. Elephant twerking on a Monday afternoon, just what we all need. A very typical scene here at El Doño of other animals queuing up, waiting for a chance to get to the water. I don't know if that was a fairly dismissive spray of water aimed at the giraffe from this bull, so to say, we are not done yet. Back off. It's almost comedic sometimes watching these animals interact. I think, in fairness, he's just giving himself a little bit of a shower. So the giraffe, a little unsure of the situation. Although you think they might want to benefit from some of that spray, cool down. Elizabeth Beauchamp, you're asking of the age of these elephants. Well, it's a discussion we have quite regularly here, and we normally sit on the fence. It's very, very difficult to say for sure. The only way you could really say for sure would be looking at the condition of the teeth, the molars in the elephant's mouth. Um, but we can also get some general gauges just by looking at the size of the elephant and some of the features. So I mentioned them already, those in this individual, some fairly obviously sunken temples. That's a good sign of age. He's got a very broad face across the sort of the bridge of the nose, the top of the trunk. That's also a good sign of age, and also just general stature. You can see he's a very large elephant, as is this one. Um, but it's very, very difficult to give you an exact age. I would guess that I think the one that's left is slightly older than this one, just looking at the girth across the base of the trunk. So this one I'd probably put in his 30s, and the one that just left maybe in his 40s. But that's, say, an educated guess based on what I can see. General life expectancy for elephants, if you read the books, is sort of 65, maybe up to 70 years. But from my experience and from chatting to people, that's a little bit of an overestimation. The oldest elephant that has ever been properly documented in the Kruger National Park, for example, based on a carcass that was and investigations done on it, was around about 57, I think, 57, 58. So I think maybe mid 60s is pushing it a little bit. Maybe it's a bit different up in Kenya. But late 50s is, I would consider, average life expectancy for an elephant, assuming they don't succumb to any diseases or predation, be it from other animals or from man, unfortunately. But ultimately, the life expectancy is dictated by their teeth. That's something we've discussed quite regularly here, but it is a really interesting and unusual situation. So we have two sets of teeth in our lifetimes, for example. We're born with our baby teeth. And then when we get a few years old, our adult teeth start to erupt from underneath, pushing out the baby teeth. Well, that doesn't happen in elephants. They are born with a set of teeth, but they are constantly recycled throughout their lives. And an elephant will have 6 sets of teeth throughout its lifespan. Um, but generally, they only have four teeth in their mouth at any one, well, at any one time, but four teeth in their mouth. They've got the four molars, two on the top, two on the bottom. They're like big bricks, and they've got these transverse ridges across them, which is fairly unique to elephants. And they are just great big grinding stones, for want of a better description, just for grinding up all the vegetation that they need to eat. And throughout their lives, a new set of teeth or new teeth are being created in the back of the jaw, and then they push forward from the back, moving towards the front. So the existing tooth gets slowly pushed towards the front of the mouth, and bits of it break off and chunks of it fall out. Probably some of them are swallowed. And then the roots are reabsorbed back into the body, and that will go into helping to manufacture the next set of teeth. So you may end up with half of the old tooth and half of the new tooth, but the surface area taken up by those teeth is the same. And as they get older, those teeth will last for longer before they are recycled. Shame these zebras had a few seconds to enjoy the water and are being pushed out again. So I forget the exact ages, but it's sort of they're born with one set, and then by the age of sort of 3 or 4, the next set will come in, and then perhaps from there by about sort of 8, 9, 10, the third set, so on and so forth. And they'll have their last sixth and final set will be completely established by around the age of sort of late 30s to 40 years of age. And then that's it for an elephant. And by that time, a big elephant bull like these are eating 2 or 300 kilograms. You have a good score. 2 or 300 kilograms of food on a daily basis. They're also taking in a lot of sort of soil and grit from the surrounding area when they're eating. And after 15 or so years, that last set of teeth becomes so worn down, it's just incapable of masticating the food properly, coupled with the fairly inefficient digestive system of an elephant that ultimately leads to malnutrition and just not being able to get enough energy from what it's eating. And when an elephant does succumb to old age, it's generally due to malnutrition. So elephants need dentists. Okay, from one big pachyderm to hopefully another, let's quickly shoot down to the Eastern Cape and to Founder's Lodge, where hopefully we've got a little treat waiting for us. Yes, we do. A beautiful, beautiful white rhino. So special to be able to view these creatures. Look at the little wagtail hopping up and down there. Mouthful of grass. Of course, that is what white rhinos eat, as opposed to the black rhino that are browsing animals. So they are eating leaves and twigs. The white rhino with that big square mouth, its proper name is a square-lipped rhino, and exclusively a bulk grazer. A giant lawnmower basically sweeping his head from side to side using those very calloused and those very calloused lips, the hard skin around there to grip hold of the grass stems and rip them up in great swathes. And some nice refreshing water to wash that grass down is a good idea, I say. Joanne, you're asking about any records for the oldest elephant. I've just been having a quick look in the background, and to be honest, you read all sorts of things. allegedly some reputed to be over 100 years old. I'm not sure if I believe that. Some suggested to be in their 80s, but certainly in captivity they'll live a lot longer. So I could believe up into the 70s or so. Again, it will be a lot. We will be related to the diet. If they're being fed nice soft food, it will allow those teeth to last longer, and I see no reason that the animal itself wouldn't be able to live longer as well. But for a rhino, a white rhino like this, you're looking at an average age of 40 to 45, so definitely a big difference there. I agree with you there, Olivia. The perspective of this camera is great. It's almost sort of at eye level to the water, so we get a really interesting view and gives a good impression of size. It's a good tip for anybody who likes photography as well. If you can get at eye level to your subject, your photo will look so much better and so much more natural. This is particularly lovely with the open landscape and the horizon behind it. A lot of people think that, say, on a game viewer, the best place to sit is right at the back because you can see the most. Well, there's an argument for that, but I say from a photographic perspective, the lower down you can get, the better. And if we as guides have the ability to, we'll often try and park at a slightly lower position from where the animal is, so that you get that opportunity to, say, shoot at eye level with what's going on, or even up with the sky behind it. It just makes for a really nice composition and subject matter. The other thing with regard to photography is people have a tendency by default to put the eye of the animal or the head of the animal in the middle of the screen. But then what you'll often find, if the animal is facing either left or right, that you end up with a lot of negative space behind the animal, which makes no sense. It's always try and it's a good idea from a compositional sense that if you're going to photograph an animal that's, say, walking from left to right, put the animal on the left-hand side of the screen, because the way it's looking and the way its body posture will be captured, your brain is automatically sort of expecting it to move into that empty space. Your brain is thinking, what is it looking at in that direction? And if you have a big gap behind the animal, it's negative space. It makes no sense, and the picture looks lopsided. So another good tip to remember: try and give the animal space to move into, or let us see what the animal is potentially looking at. Beautiful views here from Mantis Founders Lodge. Look at that incredibly vibrant blue sky, and it always contrasts so nicely to the orange. It reminds me a bit of Namibia as well, opposite each other on the color spectrum, blue and orange. Again, from a photographic perspective, that's one of the reasons that Namibia is such a great place to go and do photography. But you can really see it here as well. Actually lovely with that sort of the sky, the water, and this thin strip of orange land in between with a lone rhino. And I love that dead tree. I've got harboring great plans one day to photograph that tree with a dark sky and the Milky Way behind it. The beautiful compositional element. And that rock as well. It just makes that picture very interesting, and with the reflection. Mercedes being your right is a lovely, lovely rhino. Very, very special to see these, and we're so lucky to have this camera where we are allowed to show you guys rhinos. This one seems to be quite content in showing us his other side for now. So I think we're going to shoot up to, I think, Tow Lodge and see what's happening at the waterhole there. So from the far east to the far west, we've zoomed all the way up to Tow in Madikwe. Well, lots of general game. We can see some nice herds of blue gnu, or brindled gnu, or blue wildebeest, whatever you want to call them. Pretty much a staple at this waterhole. Unusual looking creatures, considered in some sort of African stories to have been made up of all the leftover parts of the other animals. But very successful. More so, obviously, on the great open plains of East Africa than these more fragmented sort of savanna woodlands that we have down in South Africa. Here we have little groups of them that have become fairly sedentary. They've lost that migratory tendency due to the erection of fences, the spread of urbanization, and so on and so forth. So a lot of people come to South Africa expecting to see huge, great herds of wildebeest, but it's quite normal to see little fragmented groups rather. And the same goes for zebras. But there's a mini migration, a mini Midikwe migration. A little greeting. Oh, I thought he might find a hoof in his muzzle just there. You often notice a lot of head shaking of wildebeest and zebras when they're moving and sort of head waggling or wagging. Um, there are some theories for that, that perhaps because of the zebra having um, the eyes on the sides of their heads, that they shake their head from side to side just so they can get a better view of what's directly in front of them. But a lot of it probably has to do with those parasites, those rather unpleasant bot flies, which you've probably heard of. And particularly when you see wildebeest and zebra sort of sneezing and exhaling violently through their nose, that's probably something to do with those flies. It's a really unpleasant relationship if you're one of those antelope species with the bot flies. So they buzz around and they actually try and lay their eggs. Well, in fact, they don't even lay eggs. Bot flies are a bit strange. I think it's called larvipary, whereby they actually lay larvae. They don't even lay eggs. I'm assuming that the eggs develop inside the body of the fly, and then as opposed to depositing an egg on the skin, they actually deposit a, a sort of an embryonic larvae in and around the eye of these animals. Um, and then from there, those animals sort of enter a vein, or whether they get in through the tear ducts or somewhere, they crawl in sort of behind the eye, basically. And then they migrate down to the animal's cardiovascular system, and then they start to develop a little bit more, a bit more thoroughly, no, develop a little bit more, and then they migrate back up the trachea into the nasal cavity, where they sort of attach to the nasal membrane there, and they feed on the blood until they are mature, and then that starts to really irritate that animal, and then they're usually sort of discharged when they sneeze. Those animals are exhaling through their nose to get rid of that irritation. That's when they pop out onto the floor, and then they will pupate and come out again as adult flies and repeat the process. So it's a rather unpleasant thing. I'm glad that I don't have to deal with the problem of bot flies, but a very much a common problem for particularly for wildebeest. Aussie lady, picture perfect, you say. I agree, it's a lovely waterhole. There's always some activity, even if it's just some aquatic bird life there. We had a spoonbill, we've got some moorhens, maybe a little black crake, and a yellow-billed stork. Nice to see the diversity of life. There's lovely contrasting colours. Looks like a big sort of Marvel-esque red face band. Very much relaxed. Looks like he's broken his knees, but remember those are in fact a bird's wrists in terms of physiology than the knees. It looks as if they're bending the wrong way, but it does look rather uncomfortable and a bit awkward. Pat, you're right. Nature is so artistic. Whether it's the striped patterns on a zebra, those beautiful rosettes we saw on the leopard yesterday, the stunning markings of this yellow-billed stork, saddle-billed storks, particularly in the avian kingdom, where of course birds do see in colour, so visual communication is very, very important. Think of the birds of paradise, think of a peacock, um, even fish, and there are some incredibly coloured insects as well, and arthropods. The world is awash with a cacophony of colours. This one just needs to wash his toes, though he's got rather dirty feet. Been skulking around in the mud. Just look a bit strange with those legs at 90 degrees the wrong way. Lovely little downy feather just floating around in the back, just got caught up in some old elephant dung, but even that is artistic in itself. But from one big bird to what I think will be many more, we're going to head up to Victoria Falls for some vultures. It's feeding time at Vic Falls, and let the chaos begin. Marabou storks, whiteback vultures, hooded vultures. We'll have to see if there's any others in there, but look at the bedlam. If some of you haven't seen this before, you might be wondering, why are we feeding animals? Isn't that sort of against the rules, as it were? But remember, vultures are all now basically critically endangered due to a variety of reasons: habitat loss, poisoning, traditional medicine markets, lots of reasons. So it is important that we're doing our bit for conservation, and they say are still performing a very important role, getting rid of a lot of those waste products. So there are times when it is perhaps the right thing to do to step in and give a more of a human influence. So this is known as a vulture restaurant, of which there are quite a few over the continent, just trying to help the plight of vultures in general. There's a real rugby scrum going on in there. These vultures, like many birds of prey, have that crop, that area of the throat where they can store food. So they wolf it down, put it in the crop. There'll be a little bit of enzymatic digestion that takes place in there, but ultimately it's a storage device allowing the vulture to eat as much as it can and then move away somewhere and finish digesting that food in peace. It's very important for the ecosystem that we have these decomposers, or these types of animals that can deal with all of those waste products, because there's a huge knock-on effect. Without them, we don't think about it so much, but we would all live in a very different world. There would be a real prevalence of pestilence and disease, leaving all these perfect breeding grounds for flies and bacteria. But thanks to the good work of these and other things like, say, various types of bacteria, millipedes, even ants, that feed on carrion. They do a wonderful job of controlling the spread of disease and insects in general. Yeah, well, it seems the majority of that meat has been consumed already, so we're going to shoot back down to Mantis Founders Lodge and enjoy some more views of that rhino. That's very, very cool. What are you doing in those rocks? Well, it looks like he's sniffing something, smelling something. Definitely looks to be more of an investigatory behavior. Looks like he's having a good, whether a female has been down or another male and possibly urinated on those rocks. Some information there. Thought for a minute maybe he was just having a scratch of his muzzle, which you do see sometimes as well. And often rhinos will see these sort of sharpen their horns, a little bit of a manicure, I suppose, but also they also have issues with parasites. We have things called horn moths, which once are laid in and around the base of the horn, and the larvae will actually feed on those on the keratin. Not very many things that do eat keratin. You often see, if you see skulls with horns in and around the bush, that there's a lot of those. Almost sort of describe them as looking like dreadlocks coming off the horns, which are the casings from those horn moths as they're developing and pupating. But say you don't really, you will never see that when the animal is alive because they're constantly removing them. Yeah, it seems our rhino has disappeared. Let's go back up to Kenya and to Old Dongo. I was asked about any sort of well-known vulture charities and conservations. I mean, there are lots, and I think it would be unfair of me to just mention one in particular. I know certainly close to here, there's a lot of vulture rehabilitation that goes on at Moholo Holo, which is an animal rehab centre not too far from Hoedspruit. You've got other companies or other organisations. Volpro is a really famous one, but there are lots of others. I'm just doing a quick look online, to be honest, but the Vulture Conservation Foundation, the Vulture Conservation Project through Tusk, Project Vulture, the EWT, the Endangered Wildlife Trust, also does their bit. So there are lots and lots of conservation organisations that are attempting to assist the plight of the vultures at the moment. But they are, unfortunately for them, one of those organisms that's often seen in a very negative light, thanks to people's perception of them. But it is a shame. They're actually fascinating creatures, lots of interesting adaptations, and vitally important for the ecosystem, more so than they are usually given credit for. So Andy, that was you asking. I hope that's given you some ideas. Dark Mane Lover, you also agreeing that was indeed a beautiful rhino. Nice to have such a close-up view of him, even though he didn't stick around for too long. These elephants are mean sometimes, particularly the youngsters. It's often the youngsters that have a problem with other animals coming down to drink. But I do think it's a bit unfair that these elephants then just hang around the waterhole, not even drinking. They're just very much staking a claim to it. They seem to tolerate other animals from time to time, but often these younger bulls, less so. A little bit of extra testosterone, bit of small elephant syndrome. Interesting to see all those little holes on that elephant's ear at the back. You often see big rips or larger holes, maybe just because it's backlit by the bright sky. But what you see, it looks like it's got loads and loads of piercings. I would think they are mostly caused from sticking their heads into spiny trees. They've just left this sort of almost Morse code like appearance on the side of the ear. You can see this youngster doesn't have any of those from what I can see. The sign of age, you can see how ragged the edges look as well. Years and years of wear and tear. Oh, look at those beautiful veins as well. See how much of the water has been deposited behind the ears. You could see when he flapped his head forward, you could see how damp that area was. That will remain in the shade for longer, cool that blood, and then by fanning the ears, just creates airflow over that almost paper thin skin of the ears, cools that blood and sends it around the rest of the body, just like a car radiator. Brilliant adaptation of thermoregulation. Love those concentric rings of muscle running down the trunk. You'll get lots of different figures as to how many muscles are there, but if you look at what we would consider subgroups of muscles, potentially over 100,000 little concentric rings of muscles all working together to give that elephant complete 360-degree flexibility in that incredible appendage. where he's just touching around the soil there. Of course, it's an incredibly sensitive organ, and there are special things called Pacinian corpuscles on its tip, which are specific receptors that we believe are potentially able to pick up vibrations as well in terms of communication. Those same um, receptors have also been found on the feet of elephants around the toes, and often when you see an elephant go completely stationary, it'll sort of lean forward, shift its weight to the front, which some people think might be making sure those Basilian corpuscles are in good contact with the ground, picking up seismic vibration of communications that have been sent from tens of kilometers away, traveling through the earth, and what are called Raleigh waves or Rayleigh waves that can then be picked up and interpreted, possibly even also just those vibrations passing through those very dense bones up the leg and into the ossicles, into those little bones in the ears that vibrate at different frequencies and hold all of that information. I love these close-up pictures of an elephant's feet and legs. They look so prehistoric. That's what I imagine brachiosaurs and stegosauruses and diplodocuses and all those dinosaur feet must have looked like. That's something. So I find something strangely interesting about an elephant's feet. It's the way they bulge. It's actually really interesting to watch an elephant's foot whilst they're walking. You can really see when the weight is placed on them, particularly on the front feet, which is holding the bulk of their weight. So they're far more rounded in shape than the more oval track. Look at the way it expands when they put the weight on it, just absorbing that weight and that spongy pad underneath the heel. It just helps to distribute the weight, and also potentially might act in terms of that. It's kind of like a resonation chamber, a resonance chamber that we were just talking about with picking up vibrations. Imagine how many kilometers those feet have trodden through the African wilderness. So an interesting relationship to an elephant's size in terms of his shoulder height and those front feet. And this is a nice demonstration that we do on safari sometimes. If you imagine that foot, if you see that elephant's track, if you were to then take a piece of string, or you can use grass or whatever other medium you have to hand, and you measure the circumference of that front foot, and then double that length. So measure the circumference, double it, and that will give you the approximate shoulder height. I say approximate, it's actually quite accurate, usually within about 10 centimeters or so of the shoulder height of that elephant. Now, you might not think that that's very big, but the circumference of that foot is a lot more than you realize. And if you see the front foot of a big male elephant and measure it, you're probably looking at, say, a meter and a half, perhaps. Actually traced it out, it's a lot bigger than you think. And to demonstrate that, normally you have to stand on the bonnet of the car to get high enough to show the shoulder height of that animal. It's a nice thing to do. Something nice and interactive, very important from a guiding principles. Try and involve guests, utilize different senses and demonstrate things as opposed to just dictate information. Not impossible to find an elephant toenail as well. They're attached to anything, those toenails. They're kind of what we call them floating toenail with a I won't say a traumatic injury, but if the wrong bump or scrape and one of those toenails can come off, and it's not that I've ever seen one, but apparently it is possible to find an elephant toenail. Be a pretty cool thing to have in your collection. Look at the way it lifts up and then sort of mushrooms out with that weight. You can see not quite so prevalent on the back foot, far more oval in shape because the back foot only has to hold the weight basically of the pelvis, whereas that those front feet have the weight of the shoulders, the head, the trunk, the tusks. And you'll find in the majority of animals, with the exception really of the lagomorphs, the rabbits and the hares, the front feet will always be bigger than the back feet and better designed for taking the weight just because of the physiology, the way that animal has been put together and the weight distribution of it. But there were some really cool visuals, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. I've got to think about elephant feet. That's what we can't see from this angle is all the cracks on the underside of an elephant's foot. You really get to see it in nice substrate in a track. And every single elephant footprint is unique, just like a fingerprint. And it is possible, say, to track an individual elephant within a group by if you can really identify those sort of lines of the cracks on the underside of the feet, but like crazy paving, I suppose. And sometimes you find some with very distinctive markings, and you are able to distinguish it amongst others in a big group of tracks. Hello, Warties. You trying your luck? This elephant's watching them carefully. Being surrounded, elephant. Caroline, yes, you can sometimes find female elephants or elephant cows on their own. It's not a common thing. They're generally very much more associated with the breeding herd social structure, but sometimes they do get separated. And particularly the really old cows might leave the safety of the herd again, probably because of the teeth. Older elephants will tend to hang out in areas where the vegetation is softer, so usually close to water sources, swampy areas, wetland areas, because it is just easier to extract nutrition from soft vegetation as it is than it is from dry and sort of fibrous material. So it doesn't happen often, but it certainly, I've seen it a few times in just individual female elephants. There's a beautiful eland. Now, I was asked questions yesterday about elands and distribution, and I've been trying to unravel the mystery of it as to whether how prevalent they are. Of course, you do get the giant eland and the common eland. So this is the common eland. Giant eland is in West Africa, not very many of them. But of the common elands, this looks like a sort of a sub-adult bull. They do or used to occur pretty wide ranging. They don't like desert areas, they don't like forested areas or swampy areas, more specialized to arid and semi-arid areas, certainly, but also sort of grassy plains. So they are in the Drakensberg. And we were talking about Amakala having Iland. I'm still not sure whether they were introduced to Amakala, but that is quite close to the Drakensberg escarpment. So possibly they migrated in from there. But certainly a lot fewer now than they used to be. Lots of reasons for that. Again, unfortunately, the majority of which is sort of human based. They are sought after for their meat. It is actually a very, very nice meat if you've ever had eland. And they're quite easily domesticated. And I did not realize, but apparently there's a small population of eland in Russia. They've been exported there and are actually sort of farmed for meat and milk. But they used to occur um, throughout the Kruger Park, but now basically restricted to the northern areas. But a spectacular antelope and revered amongst tribal culture in Africa. If you look back to the Bushmen, the Kalahari, the Khoisan people, there are many, many depictions of Eland in ancient rock art. It was held in very, very high regard and used in lots of traditional rituals, particularly with regard to the first hunt of a young boy in terms of achieving adulthood. There are rituals for a girl's first menstruation. People would dress up, and the men would pretend to be males with horns. The females would pretend to be, or the ladies would pretend to be female eland, and they would go through this whole process. It was supposed to keep the girl safe through her first menstruation period. For say, from a hunting perspective, when a young boy achieved his first successful hunt, there was a big ritual and scarifications were made on the arm, and the fat of an eland and plant material was rubbed into those scars to um, I assume to sort of help moving forward with successful hunts and virility and things. particularly the fat of an eland, and particularly from a male around the heart region, apparently was very, very important. Um, Also involved in marriage rites as well, marriage rituals, the anointing of people with eland fat, and also in sort of trance dances that the shamans used to perform to do anything such as try and bring rain and so on and so forth. So lots of examples where eland were held in huge regard by ancient African cultures. And there are even a couple of eland in the sky as well. Procyon or Procyon, the eighth brightest star in the sky, or eighth brightest star in the sky, was considered by the Bushmen to be a male eland with Castor and Pollux, the two bright stars in Gemini, considered to be the wives of the eland. This red-billed oxpeckers taking the opportunity to have a quick bath as well. Mhm. Like those little black slashes just above the knee there. I've never really noticed those before. I would assume that's some type of following mechanism, so herds can keep in contact with each other when moving over distances. And you can also see that dewlap. It was far more obvious on the male that was drinking that we saw first. We were talking yesterday about adaptations for animals in dry areas, and it is thought that the dewlap may also play a role in thermoregulation, preferring dry and arid habitats. It just helps to increase surface area. There'll be plenty of blood vessels in there, picking up the wind and cooling that blood down and alleviating some of the internal body temperature. Can't stop noticing that black uh, band behind, just above the knee, now on the back side of the forelegs. Dundo, it does look very peaceful, you're right. Until the next big group of zebra come down and start biting and scratching and kicking and making lots of noise and fuss. But yeah, very peaceful and nice to see lots of different species coexisting with the warthogs, eland, zebra, elephants, plenty of bird species. Inland are not super water dependent. They will obviously drink where they can, but because of those drier areas that they often frequent, we've discussed how they can regulate body temperature and remove sweating. They can raise their body temperature by up to sort of 7, 8 degrees, which can save, I forget the exact figure, but something like 20 or 30 liters of fluid being lost from sweat by increasing your core body temperature so you don't lose sweat outwardly. But they, like other arid specialists like Kremsbock and things, will also, where they can, eat succulent things, roots, tubers under the ground that contain lots of moisture. One that we get down here, which you can actually prove that and demonstrate that, is something called mother-in-law's tongue, as its colloquial name, but it's one of the Sansevieria genus. It's kind of a succulent, and if you actually dig one of those up, they have these very bulbous sort of roots. And if you just clean off the outer layer of the skin and the soil, and then chew on it, even in the middle of winter when it's completely bone dry outside, you can get moisture from it. You can taste the moisture. It's juicy when you bite into it. It's a little bit like sugarcane in terms of its texture. I wouldn't recommend swallowing it, and it's not the tastiest thing you'll ever have, but it is a good source of water. It's supposed to be good for ear conditions as well, here to alleviate ear infections. How effective it is, I'm not sure. And also been used, those big sort of leaves, those succulent leaves that they produce, which are very wide. You can eat out of them, use them as footwear. And because they're quite fibrous, people used to collect the fibers, and you can actually make a very, very strong rope from them as well. So, useful plants, the mother-in-law's tongue. It's slightly comedic, and some might say cruel colloquial name. Canine girl, absolutely. It is fascinating how the markings on these different species mean so much more than just what we see. And of course, everything that we think we know is purely from educated guesses of what we think we understand, but we'll never truly know what those markings mean to other individuals of the same species. But yeah, there are some incredibly coloured and patterned things throughout the animal kingdom. A lot of the brightly coloured things are warning signs, particularly in the insect world, which again, generally predated upon by birds, which we know have good colour vision. So often when you see insects that are brightly coloured, they are displaying what we call aposematic coloration, which is basically saying, here I am, you can see me, but eat me at your peril because I'm likely to taste bad, or I'm poisonous, or I have a sting, or I have a noxious smell, or some form of defense. So it's one way of nature sort of communicating with its predators, or prey communicating with its predators, saying, don't eat me, you can see me, but I'm very obvious because I want you to learn not to eat me. And then you get the species, of course, that are brightly coloured that are not particularly dangerous or unpleasant. And that's an example of what we call mimicry. You get two forms of mimicry: Batesian mimicry. Look at the lovely markings of this zebra with those sort of little dots on his spine. His whole spine, really pretty. Batesian mimicry and Müllerian mimicry. So Batesian mimicry is something pretending to be unpleasant when it is not. A classic example of that out here is the African monarch butterfly, which is poisonous. Its larvae feed on the milkweed family of plants, which is toxic, and the adult retains some of those toxins and is poisonous to eat. So it's this lovely orange and black contrasting light and dark colors, which nature has learnt. And then you have a species of butterfly called the diadem, where the only the female, interestingly enough, looks almost identical to the monarch, but is not toxic and is capitalizing on that inherent knowledge that predators have learnt about those colors. Malarian mimicry is things sharing similar colors that are both unpleasant, and just sort of reinforcing that message. So, again, classic example, bee and a wasp, both bright yellow, dark black, contrasting colors, both sting. As if to say, if you didn't learn enough from the bee, now here's the wasp that does the same thing. Learn that these colors are bad. But it does make you wonder what else is going on that we are just not privy to or we haven't even thought of. It's a bit like the discussion yesterday. Somebody asked me about animals and feeling pain. I did do quite a lot of reading about that, and it is as I postulated yesterday. I mean, we have no doubt that animals feel pain. They exhibit responses to pain. They limp. They shy away from things that they have learnt are unpleasant. So they must obviously feel pain. What we will never know is the emotional response to pain because they cannot communicate it. And if you can't communicate something, it's very difficult for us to understand, and we just have to make assumptions and educated guesses based on what knowledge we do have and past experience. Beautiful markings on these Maasai giraffe, different from the southern African giraffe that we have down here in South Africa. But again, look very pretty, but also perform a role important in thermoregulation, helping that body remove the internal body temperature through those darker patches. There's lots of videos and things you can go and watch online and documentaries on where they've used infrared cameras to show the release of body heat through those patches. So yes, they look pretty, but they perform a role. Nature doesn't waste time and energy creating these intricate patterns without a good reason. And it would be amazing to find a predator here one day. Yeah, you never know. So a leopard rocked up yesterday, and I believe that there were some cheetahs seen on this waterhole camera, not live, but a few weeks ago or a month or so ago, there were a few cheetahs seen here. So anything could happen. We live in hope. I would imagine there must be some predators around in this area. This water seems to attract such a prevalence of game and potential prey animals that you would think that the predators would be in the area as well. They would have learnt these movements and migrations, but these movement patterns of these animals. And so it's not uncommon to see lions lying up next to watering holes, particularly in the winter. A, because they want the water, but B, it's the perfect hunting ground. Animals have to come and drink, and if this is the only water for kilometers in any direction, um, then it's a really good place to find yourself some food. I think we're going to roll the dice at one of our other water holes. I didn't quite catch where we were going, but let's go have a look. We're going to Hokokoyu in Namibia. So we've been to Kenya, northwest of South Africa, the eastern side of South Africa, and now over to Namibia. So cool to have such a diversity of places to visit. And lone elephant bull having a drink. And springboks skipping around on the near side of the dam. I think somebody was saying a few weeks back that not that long ago a leopard was seen on this waterhole camera as well. So you never know. Maybe today's the next day. Two leopards in 2 days would be pretty spectacular, but we're not going to get carried away. We are very grateful for anything that we see in any of these locations. Caroline, yes, we do see breeding herds and bulls at this waterhole. We've just got a solitary lone bull at the moment, but a couple of days ago we had a breeding herd of, I would have estimated something between sort of 50 and 60 that come through here. Well, it came through here. They were all in the water having a full-on elephant pool party. It was great to watch. But again, like anything, there are differences throughout the season. This time of year, we expect to see more because it's drying up, and the animals are headed towards this area as permanent water sources. Other times in the year, we don't see so many elephants here at Kikuyu because they're far more spread out as there's more availability of resources. It is one of nature's delights to see a big breeding herd of elephants with some zealous youngsters all bouncing around in the water and jumping on each other. And we had one the other day that completely submerged himself just through this little snorkel or the trunk up to still continue to breathe. They really are such joyous things to watch when they're in a happy mood, elephants. Again, whether or not we just relate to them because they are so forthcoming with their emotions, maybe we recognize that emotional intelligence, but they really do seem to delight in water, particularly the youngsters. Maybe we get lucky and some more come down this afternoon. Okay, it sounds like we're doing a sort of a rapid fire visit to waterholes where we've got elephants drinking. I think we're going to go to Kwamaratan now, where we've got an elephant. Beautiful. So this is one of our cameras in the Pilanesberg National Park, so just an hour or two north of Johannesburg. Oh, and gave me a bit of a fright there. not a waterhole we visit very regularly, actually. I think this may actually be the first time that I have been to Cormorant. Oh, got a bit of a fright by this other elephant coming in, I think. Lovely Circia tree in the foreground there, known as the gin and tonic tree. Actually pick that leaf and crush it up. It smells just like tonic. Let's call it the gin and tonic tree. Canine Girl, you're asking when it comes to communication in species, is there a difference within females? I'm not quite sure what you're asking there, but um, I imagine, I mean, the first thing that springs to mind in terms of the males and females is perhaps females have a greater repertoire of communicative ability just because of the relationship they will have with their offspring. That the males don't, because generally there's very, very little parental care within the animal kingdom, or as I say, paternal care within the animal kingdom. Males' role is pretty much pass on genetics and move on and repeat. Um, you could possibly argue there are closer social bonds just because of the breeding herd structure, for example, in elephants, but I would imagine that the methods of communication are going to be the same within the species or within a given species. I'm not sure I fully understand exactly what you're asking there, um, but pretty much within a given species, the communication mechanisms would be the same, I would think. I don't think there will be too much difference between the sexes, although maybe the females are privy to, say, more stimuli than the males are, just because of the social structure in general of females versus males. But in something like leopard, where males and females are both solitary, I would imagine that the only difference that I can think of, say, would be any relationship that they would have with offspring that they are caring for. Obviously, you do get differences in coloration, certainly, and birds, the obvious thing, where males are more brightly coloured, and the males will then lose those bright colours outside of breeding season, go into what we call their eclipse plumage, and then molt those feathers and develop the more brighter feathers in conjunction with the breeding season, so they are more attractive to members of the opposite sex and less visible to predators during a time where that is not so important. And then, of course, you get the reverse in polyandrous bird species, where it's the female that's more brightly coloured because she will mate with multiple males and leave him to look after the eggs or to incubate the eggs and look after the young. So certainly visual communication differs. I would think mechanisms remain the same between sexes in a given species. Mercedes Bean, yes, it is nice to see Cormorant. It's not a waterhole that we visit very often, and how nice to see a couple of elephants. interesting geology, all about the Pilanesberg area. Very volcanic, sort of a volcanic crater, basically. Lots of fascinating geology to be had there that I'm not going to go into just yet. It might give me something to read up on um, this evening, or maybe we'll discuss it tomorrow if we get a chance to look at Cormoratan again. There's something moving in the background there. But yeah, I've been to Bilansberg a few times, just on a self-drive basis, but I've never actually worked in that area. But wonderful for the people in the interior of the country to have access to a game reserve not too far away from the big population centres of Johannesburg and Pretoria. I don't know if anybody else saw what that was that was sneaking through the bushes in the background. Possibly this elephant going in for a closer look as well. Looked rather antelope-y, but that's as far as I could get. Just really saw movement. Yeah, still something moving in the background just to the left of this elephant. Kudu, maybe? Very hard to tell. These two boys having a little bit of a push and a shove. We'll push him into the water. Definitely the one at the back is the instigator. This other one looks as if he was just trying to get away, and the one on the right went right the way around the tree just so they could lock tusks and have a bit of a push. A bit of a gap there. Maybe whatever was behind them will pop out into that opening. Ah, it's so good to see. This one on the left really doesn't seem that keen and just occasionally says, "Oh, go on then. If you've got the bit between your teeth, I suppose we'll have a little bit of a box, and then I'm going to try and ignore you again." 'Lady Macbeth, I was saying, just back to what I was saying about that Circia tree, or it used to be a Rus, saying the tonic is flavored by quinine. I agree. Derived from the bark of the, excuse my pronunciation, the cinchona tree, which has been used to treat malaria. And you're saying, would that be a gin and tonic tree? Well, say a gin and tonic tree is just a very colloquial term that I, as a guide, have used just because people are reminded of the smell of tonic and the idea of having gin and tonic at sundowners. But certainly, there is plenty of research to suggest that quinine does help against malaria as well. It's a sort of an on-running joke, I suppose you could say, that have a gin and tonic because it might protect you from malaria. I'm afraid I don't know much about the cinchona tree or cinchona tree. I'm not even sure how you pronounce it, but I'll go and have a look at it certainly. But quinine is a naturally occurring thing, certainly. Also suggestions that marula tree has been successfully used to treat malaria in the past. So unsurprising, really, the majority of modern day medicines have their origin in chemicals found in plants. Another good reason to protect our native wildlife, not just wildlife, but plant life, particularly take the rainforests, for example. Melinda 67, you're saying that Quamaratana is one of your favourite places to stay. Yeah, not never actually been there. So I've been to Bilonsberg. I think I've possibly stayed in one of the campsites at Quamaratana, if there is one there or one in that area. But I haven't been to Pilansberg for many years now. But I enjoy it. I remember enjoying it. Visually very interesting, say, with regard to that geology and some good sightings there. I still sense this one on the left is very much trying to ignore the enthusiasm from the one on the right. That last little exchange looked a little bit more aggressive, as if to say, okay, you're really beginning to tick me off now. Just leave me alone. I'm quite happy here. Stop harassing me. There's beautiful autumn colours, there's winter colours, the anthocyanin in the leaves. It's interesting to me that even in sort of spring and summer, a lot of young leaves on particular trees, jackalberries and tambuetis spring to mind, also have this orangey red colour. Few theories as to why that is. One, they're still young, so why waste the energy in trying to photosynthesize when you've got a whole tree full of adult leaves that are able to do so? So don't waste your time trying to produce energy for the tree, rather focus on um, growing yourself. But I think the one that makes the most sense to me is control against parasites. The majority of very small insects that are going to feed on leaves are green, and that helps them hide away from their potential predators when they're feeding on a leaf. If you're the same color as your background, good chance you're less visible to your predators. But for a young leaf that is orange, a green parasite feeding on it will be far more visible to its predators and will have a greater chance the tree will have a greater chance of removing that parasite. So maybe a clever idea from the tree to make its parasites and predators more visible to their predators. Canine girl, I see you're back with a more of a sort of a detailed question with regard to that communication between different sexes. Um, the simple answer is, Canine girl, I don't know. So it's a little bit like what we were saying about the pain discussion. We will never know for sure because we can't ask the animals what they are feeling, and we can only infer from our own experiences. My gut feel is that the communication be- between males and females, or between females and females, or males and males of the same sex, will be very, very similar. In terms of the emotions that they feel or the way in which those emotions are interpreted, uh, I don't know. You could certainly argue that females would be sort of more to loss and death of youngsters or death of individuals from within a particular breeding structure or a social structure. A lot will also come down to the processing ability of the brains. We know that elephants have enlarged area of their brains to do with emotion and memory and olfactory communication and things. So a lot will be dictated by brain chemistry and physiology. But it's an interesting question. I don't know, is the answer, I'm afraid. And so until we create a universal translation machine that can actually talk to these animals, it may well be just a matter of discussion until that point. Okay, well, it looks like these elephants are moving off into the foliage now, but that was a really nice little visit to the lesser seen Cormorant waterhole. Let's go back up to Madikwe to Tau. And finally, we've got some young elephants, a breeding herd. These ones have already been in the water. See, she's got her dark socks on. You see, have a little paddle. And lots of little ones. So look at that little cute one. Hello, cutie. Just thinking again about this sort of communication question. I mean, in elephants, let's talk about elephants because probably more is known about elephant communication than it is in other animals. But young males will grow up in a breeding herd situation like this. They'll spend 14, 15 years maybe around the other members of the groups. So I see no reason why they don't pick up the same abilities in terms of communication. Again, if there is something different in the interpretation of those emotions, I don't think we'll ever know. But look at this little one. Like a kid on the beach digging a hole. You gonna have a little lie down in the mud? Not sure if he's trying to lie down or if he just keeps losing his footing. He's going to lie down, look like a dog, just scraping the topsoil off to get to the cooler layer underneath. Getting very frustrated about getting his feet stuck. I think that's why we love elephants. They are just very open in their communication most of the time. Here's one that's already had a bit of a play in the mud by the look of it, and decided this is a good place, a good idea. We're going to come do the same thing. Oh, that was very special. Vivian Bernerecki, I'm glad you're enjoying these visuals. We've had a lovely afternoon today. Lots of elephants as well, but some interesting things to watch. Oldonio was very, very active as normal, and lovely to see Cormorant for the first time in a while, and of course that rhino down at Founders Lodge. And I, for one, particularly enjoyed those little elephants having a roll around in the mud. And really nice to see those eland up close having a drink as well. What are you munching on, girl? You found some nice soft grass in the mud there. Look at that tusk, almost worn right the way through those grooves from breaking branches over that left-hand tusk in this case. But she looks as if that groove is two-thirds, maybe even three-quarters of the way that it's worn through the tip of that tusk. But definitely an older female. Again, you can see from those big sunken lobes on the forehead or depressions. But particularly how deeply grooved that tusk is would be a good sign of age as well, I would think. Although I imagine that they probably have stronger tusks and weaker tusks among elephants from a genetic perspective, the same way some of us have to go to the dentist more often to get our teeth filled, and others of us get away with it and don't have to go quite so often. We've had some lovely close-up visuals today. Dark Main Lovey are also loving these waterhole cameras today. I'm not surprised. I think I'm just thinking back as to what we've seen. Also, those close-ups of the elephant's feet there at Old Donio. I really enjoyed that for some strange reason. But nice to see a different perspective sometimes. Okay, I think we're going to shoot back over to Kwamaratan. Sounds like some more Ellies have turned up. Just nice to have a little look at that camera again before we're finished. Ah, lots of Ellies now. Yeah, this boy is thoroughly enjoying himself. Oh, you're going to have a roll around. Oh, brilliant. Still creating some mud pies there. Look at that. I wonder if this youngster's going to decide that's a good idea. I want to play. Not often you see them using their back feet to disturb the mud like this. It's normally their front feet. thought this little one would want to come and get involved. Oh, we've just got to get going flat on our sides now. Oh, there's a youngster putting his feet up there. He's also going to have a lie down. How magical is this, everybody? Some very happy elephants. Well, unfortunately, we're almost out of time, though. Only about 90 seconds or so to go, but I'm sure you'll agree with me that this has been another spectacular day. We've seen some beautiful sights, some very interesting behaviour. Dark Mane Lover, I'm glad you've enjoyed today's show. And Canine Girl as well, that we've been able to give you your animal fix for the day. Oh, look at all the little ones coming in. So special. Okay, well, we're down to the last 30 seconds, but what a spectacular way to finish with all these Ellies enjoying the waterhole. It's just a big scrum of elephants, a full-blooded pool party. I hope you've actually have. And I'll see you all again tomorrow at 12:30 for more.